How long have we known each other? 10 years? We didn't have any kids. I know that.
Yeah, it's close.
Like, not even thinking
it would
about
have
it.
been, I mean, it would have been like either 2014 or 2015.
Yeah. Because you were like looking for a girlfriend, and now look at you, you're married.
I know, that's true. I was single, you know.
You
I
were
remember
single.
you were kind of like, so I got some friends.
Right. I was like in my matchmaking mode. Okay. Are we recording?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was in like matchmaking mode, trying to figure out who I knew. That was like
Oh yeah.
OSA days. I think.
Oh yeah. No, I mean it was, I think, you know, because you were with the College of Social Work.
Yeah. And I was like, if I keep organizing, I'm gonna get fired.
Yeah, there was a little
Not from the college, but maybe like, you know, I could see those above the college not being happy with. That was like, what? That was like 2014 when like Black Lives Matter was like a new.
Yeah.
There was
this just
like,
reckoning happening.
Yeah. And there was like the whole debate about like what that actually meant. And to see what that turned into to today is really like wild. And I can't believe it's been that long.
No, that's so true. That's actually what I was thinking about when I parked my car and I walked over, because the last time that I parked over there was in 2020 over the summer when I was going over to the protests.
Yeah.
But instead of National Guard troops in front of me, it was just, you know, somebody walking their dog.
Yeah, I know. It's so surreal to just think. I actually went to a conference a couple weeks ago, and it was in Missouri, and in St. Louis, and Mike Brown's father was there, and like his family was there, and they were talking about just kind of the how those organizers in St. Louis like helped galvanize like the movement as we know it today, right? They talked about Trayvon and then Mike Brown, and it was like that time has gone so fast. It feels like a million years, but then it feels like 5
And then
days.
I was going to say, but it also feels like yesterday.
Yeah.
Like very much both.
I know. I'm tired.
We have a new fight like every 4 to 5 years.
I know. I know. But here we are still, you know.
Here we are.
Working. So yeah, I've known you for Stuart. This is Stuart McIntyre, folks.
Hello. Nice to meet all of you.
And this is Izetta Thomas.
Hello.
And I'm so excited to have y'all on the show. We're here to talk about something that I think people like to talk about a lot. Schools. The school district, Columbus City Schools, is, I think, especially for people who are from Columbus, right? I think if you went to Columbus City Schools, it's like a place that you hold near and dear to your heart. Matter of fact, my friend created those shirts.
Nice. Yeah. I remember
Greg.
when they were on the mouse pads in the library.
Yep.
So we'd be on the library computers and you'd just be sliding over the Apple
Greg Turner.
logo.
Yeah, Greg Turner. He created that design.
That's so cool.
And I went to OU with him. And I remember the first time I met him, I didn't even know him. And he was like, yeah, I went to Eastmoor. And I was like, well, what is Eastmoor? Because I'm not from Columbus. Like, why are you telling me?
Right.
But it was like that whole group, they all went to Eastmoor, and they were very proud of like the school that they went to. And that was like, you know, that was like what separated you from like the next person.
Your high school was your Columbus calling card.
Right.
As soon as you say you're from Columbus, it's like, okay, what school you go to?
Right.
Next is what side of town you grew up on, because those didn't always match.
Yeah, exactly. And when my husband is from here, and so when I came here, that was the next thing that I noticed. Like, oh, that's not just an OU thing. And I think that's very much in Ohio. That's like a Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus thing. But I say all that to say people are very like attached to the school system in the district. So y'all are from Columbus Education Justice Coalition. And what's happening right now in Columbus that a lot of people are talking about is school closures, possible school closures. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. First, I want to say thank you, because y'all are volunteers, right? Like, this is something that you're doing out of your love for the city and your love for
I will
the
be
youth.
completely honest. I am not a volunteer. I am
Okay.
a paid community organizer.
Okay. Well, you
so-
should be paid for organizing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Let's pay organizers. So thanks for saying that. I love to hear it.
One salary, but probably like 4 jobs.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about your role at the coalition?
Yeah, I can give a little history, a little background and how I
Okay.
got to this point, if that's okay. So
Yeah.
I actually am a licensed educator in the state of Ohio. I am approaching this August my 20th year.
Wow.
So I started teaching in Columbus City Schools in 2004.
Okay.
Prior to that, I am a proud graduate of Columbus East High School, class of 1999. Go Mighty Tigers. There's my calling card.
Love it.
But so taught in the district since 2004. I am an intervention specialist. I taught special needs preschool for 10 years. I was very active early on in union work. And so got very active in the Columbus Education Association.
Okay.
Over the years, I wanted to make a larger impact on the district. I started adding up years and adding up kids, and I was like, this only going to be so many kids, and there's a lot more kids, and I want to do a lot more work. So I left the classroom and got involved in a few different positions where I could support teachers. So I thought, well, if I'm supporting teachers, then I'm indirectly supporting their kids, and so then more kids. And that just led to a few different positions, and which led me here. The Columbus Education Association sees the value in the community work.
Yeah.
And so they were looking to hire an organizer, what they call an education justice organizer. This is the first time our local has had that type of a position.
Okay.
It may be the very first one in our state, I believe. And so I was brought on to do that work. There was interview, all of that. I got accepted. And so the main purview of my work is community organizing. And so the Columbus Education Justice Coalition stemmed from a group of community partners and parents and educators and students who were all working to support all of our education professionals during the 2022 strike.
Right.
And continued on after that. So I've been the lead organizer for that, as well as a few other things that are actually collaborations between the union and the district that are super transformative. And I hope to be able to talk a little bit about that as well. But that is what led me here. So this is my second year, ending my second year in this position full time. And it's just amazing. It is. I am a Columbus native. I grew up in Columbus City Schools. Schools that I taught at are now closed, some torn down, one just sitting there, empty on the south side. I went to East High School during the time that there was the ending to desegregation busing. So I saw visibly with my own eyes what things looked like. And
I read your bio and I read that, and I was really interested in what that transition looked like and felt like when you went through it.
it was different.
What does that mean for people that might not know, like, what that actually...
busing. Yeah. So after Brown versus Board of Education, which we're this week, this Friday, coming up on the 70th anniversary of, right? Several school districts throughout the nation, there was forced desegregation, right? Forced integration. And Columbus is no different. And so...
But you graduated in the
I
late
graduated
90s.
in 99.
Yeah, and Brown versus Board was in the
was
50s.
Yeah.
A little bit of a delay there.
Yeah.
So,
So
what happened there?
And I don't know the exact years from when DSEG busing started in Columbus, but it went on for decades to try to integrate the schools in a different way. And so,
Well, I got the answer for you.
oh, what's that?
It's if you look at a lot of the private schools in the city, is the year they were founded.
The 70s, early
19,
70s.
1978.
70. Oh, okay. I was going to say 73,
okay.
but that
Well, the
makes
case
sense.
was active then, and it
Yeah.
was just getting drawn out. I learned all this from reading Getting Around Brown, which is a book that I believe has come up on this podcast before. But
Yeah, I'm sure it has. Yeah.
I'm definitely encourage anybody that really wants to dive deep into the Columbus history. Getting Around Brown is a great place to
Absolutely.
start.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
We'll put that on our page so people can read that.
So many amazing books that
Yeah.
talk about that time in Columbus. But so to give you an idea of what that looked like, what the strategy was to integrate schools, it turned into busing that technically shipped kids across town, right? So I grew up on the southeast side of Columbus, right off of Livingston Avenue, a little 2-block street called Bedford.
Okay.
With that address, I was actually supposed to attend Briggs, which is on the west side.
Yeah.
Right. But see, here's the thing. All my grandmother, my aunties, my favorite great aunt all graduated from East High School. So in kindergarten, I knew I was going to be a Tiger. Like that was just, I wasn't going anywhere else.
Yeah.
Right. I knew I was going to go to East High School. And the other thing was I'm the oldest of 8 children. I grew up in an intergenerational home, but my mother is technically a single mom, right?
Yeah.
And well, no way I was going to the west side because I was also a very active kid, engaged in school. I wanted to do all of the things. And my mom's like, you can't be on the bus by yourself coming back to a whole different side of town, like catching CODA and things like that. We didn't always have reliable transportation. And when we did, it was one car for a house of 12 people.
Yeah.
That ain't cutting it. So we did what we need to do so I could go to East High School. In my freshman year in East, and I've told Stu this a number of times, it was just a little bit of everybody. It was a lot of kids from the west side, a lot of white kids from the west side, especially some neighborhood kids. And then some of us who always had wanted to go to East had relatives. We were legacy Tigers, right? And you did whatever you needed to do to get in. There was no lottery then. So what you did to get into school, right?
Yeah.
Borrowed some addresses, whatever. So my freshman year, it was some of everybody. And that was the end of DSEG busing that school year, 95, 96. And they went back to neighborhood schools. Halls were packed my freshman year. 95 halls in East High School were packed to the gills. That following year, not so much.
You're telling me about this, and it's sort of like a triggering conversation because my husband, my mother-in-law always tells the story about how that's her baby, okay? That's her little baby. How he went to kindergarten in Columbus and she used to follow the bus because his school was so far from their house. And so she put him on the bus. She wanted him to be able to like be a big boy and get on the bus and then drive and follow the bus like literally across town. And in the midst, she would pray that he would get into Duxbury because that was in their neighborhood. And like maybe 3 weeks or 4 weeks. She said I did that for like a month. And I would just cry and follow my son's bus.
Yeah,
that is, yeah. So you're saying the schools were packed to the gills.
Packed to the gills. Then they weren't. Enrollment dropped, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't as diverse, which that didn't make a whole lot of difference. Like folks who went to East and wanted to be at East and were at East High got a whole pride. I mean, all of our schools do. So to be a Tiger was to be everything. And we had some kids that should have gone back to Briggs or somewhere or West High School and wanted to stay and drove to school or caught buses to school, that sort of thing. But enrollment decreased every year. And those 2 years in between, my sophomore year and my junior year, I remember hearing teachers and our principal at the time talk about the size of the graduating classes and not being very happy with that.
Which is still a conversation, right?
It is still a conversation. And to give you a little perspective on that, my graduating class in 99 was 144, and it was the largest we had had since DSEG busing ended. Wow. But over time now, 25 years later, and it has continued to decrease. But if you also look at the neighborhood, so has the community that was always historically there, right? There's been a disinvestment from the community, and then you had this resurgence of all the folks who left during white flight and folks who are coming back. I know folks who bought homes but lived in places like New Albany or Hilliard or Westerville and stayed in those Westerville homes until their kids graduated from high school, and then they were going to retire
back in the city. Yeah. I read a stat, I think in the dispatch, that said, I want to say in the 70s, there was like 100,000 kids in the district. And now the district sits at about 48,000 ish. Yeah. And that sounds like some of the context that you have given is the reason for the drop in enrollment. What are some other like reasons that you'd point to for that, or any additional like context that you want to give?
There's the Ohio voucher system in charter schools that sprung up in the early 2000s.
That's known as Ed Choice, right? Okay.
That's and has only gotten bigger and stronger and more charter schools since then. Like, it's a fight that those of us who have been fighting it have been fighting. At least my first remembrance is like 2002, 2003. I remember being at Ohio State as a student, and we took 1 or 2 charter buses to Cleveland to march against school vouchers. Vivica Fox was the speaker. Like, it was, we were in a church, and but since then, right, it's only gotten worse. They pop up everywhere. This past year with the budget, the Ed voucher system, Ed Choice, has been expanded. Right. And so a lot of our kiddos will leave the school district for a sense of community that they think that they can find in charter schools. And then oftentimes they come back. When I was a teacher.
Oh, we were one of those families.
Yeah.
We were one of those families.
It's a common story.
Yeah, we were one of those families. And without saying too much, because I will get emotional about it, it was like the worst. The thing that I'll say the positives, the thing that my daughter is back in Columbus City schools. And I think that the teachers that she's with and the administration that she's with, they see her for who she is versus trying to project who they think she should be or make her a problem. And I will say that I'm not one of those parents that never thinks that my daughter does anything wrong or that she's the perfect kid or anything like that. But she never had any, when I had her in Columbus City Schools, her first year, she never had any like behavioral issues, reports, nothing like that. Actually, I think she got best behavior in her class. And then I moved her with a voucher to a private school. And for the first month, she got behavioral. We got emails, phone calls, everything about her for the first month. And then something just egregious happened where I had to go in and not just go in verbally, but go in with like people, like advocates for my baby. And I have lots of resources, right? Like me and my husband are both like educated people. We have resources. Like, you think sometimes, I think even in the seat that I'm sitting, sometimes I think you can outrun certain things, right? Like if you have enough like know-how. But I really think that we experienced some implicit bias. And I was like, I cannot like keep her here, right? Knowing that this might affect how she sees her learning journey for the rest of her life, and it might affect her for the rest of her life. So we took her out, and when I say I've seen like a sea change in how excited she is about learning, about how she experiences school. So what I have said a lot to people is the grass is not always greener. There are some issues that I think that you could probably fix with Columbus City Schools, but once certain people put ideas onto your child and into your child's mind, you can never get rid of them. So, yeah. We're one of those families, and that's really why I'm like excited that y'all are here today, because I do think that I don't think I know that there are teachers. There are excellent teachers within the district. There are great schools. Obviously there are challenges. But I think that we hear more about the bad than the good. But yeah, I say that a lot, that the grass is not always greener. And so when you talk about the Ed Choice vouchers and students leaving the district due to going to charter schools, are there other things too that you think have contributed to the conversation that we're having today about like school closures?
Did you want to? I feel like I've kind of been dominating.
I'd love to tap in, and I'll introduce myself first. So I'm Stuart McIntyre. I grew up here in Columbus. I went to Columbus City Schools. Centennial High School is my alma mater. I share that with Malcolm. I was sad that he wouldn't be here to talk about Miss Crombie's class, which was a teacher that we shared that I think had a really positive and profound impact on both of our lives. But my mother also taught in the district for many years, and something interesting happened for me when I left Columbus City Schools, graduated, and went to Ohio State. And I remember my freshman year at Ohio State, right? I'm staying in a dorm. I'm meeting, other college freshmen from around the state. And people would ask me, where'd you go to high school? And I'd say, I went to Columbus City Schools. And every single time people would say, oh, isn't that ghetto? Right. And for me, again, especially as a white kid, right? There's this kind of these dots start connecting in my head, right? And also this sense of pride comes up where I'm like, well, you know what? Fuck y'all. It's Columbus City Schools against the suburbs, or whatever it may be, which now I realize that we all kind of are born into a position within this, system of racial and economic apartheid that we don't necessarily choose. But it actually led me to really ask, why is this? Why does Columbus City Schools have this reputation? Because I had such a positive experience. I credit that to really making me who I am today. My commitment to social justice, my commitment to my community, and also just a lot of the skills. I learned so many of those in Columbus Public Schools, and I see all the people that I went to school with doing incredible things in the world. And so I always had to kind of ask, okay, what's really going on here? And that led to uncovering some of the history. And I think that there's another number, right? So you brought up this number of the enrollment in the 70s at 100,000, and less than half of that today. But what's interesting is that if you look at Columbus's city population, it goes in the exact opposite direction. So the city population has grown by hundreds of thousands since the 70s. And essentially, there were choices that were made in the wake of desegregation where the city's elites abandoned Columbus City Schools. They cut it loose and let it, float off onto an island of its own.
What do you mean when you say that?
What I mean by that, and this is kind of, spelled out in detail in Getting Around Brown, a book that, once again, highly recommend. Developers understood that they could make more money by building homes in the suburbs. They could charge higher prices, and by engaging in essentially overtly racist marketing campaigns, basically targeting, would-be white homeowners and saying, do you really want to send your kids to school with them? Why don't you move up to Worthington? Why don't you move up to Powell?
Well,
why don't you move out to Dublin?
Yeah, well, that gets at the heart of the question, like, that you got in school, which is like, isn't it ghetto there? That really just means, isn't there a lot of black people?
Exactly.
When white people say that to you, that's what that means. That's what that always means. So go ahead.
But so I think part of it is, Columbus City Schools has had to fend for itself. The city leaders don't want Columbus City Schools to be successful. They just don't want it to cause some kind of public relations crisis that they have to deal with. And so while what we talk about today, sometimes we get into disagreements with school board members, with administrators. Sometimes we have different visions of what the future could look like. At no point do I ever distrust the sincerity of anybody that is working to try to make Columbus City Schools its best possible version of itself. And I think that many of us share that commitment, even if we have, situations where we don't see eye to eye.
So you're saying that it looks like y'all are fighting with each other, but you're fighting with something much bigger than
exactly
any. Yeah. So when you say that you feel like city leaders don't want the school district to be successful, what would be the incentive for that not to happen? Is it just like a mass exodus out of the schools and out of the city so that developers can come in, people who are not black or brown people can come in, people who are not immigrants can come in and have their own metropolis where no children exist, and it's sort of like, a new city, and all of the families go out to the suburbs or even further out to other areas?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's as malicious. I think it's they just don't want it to be their problem.
Okay.
What do you think, Izetta?
I have a number of different thoughts. It may not be overtly malicious, but anytime you have disinvestment from Black and brown communities in urban areas and poorer areas and areas of town where you have historically had labor workers like the South Side,
right,
and
the
Buckeye
West.
Steel and those types of things, it is malicious.
Yeah.
Right. We are fighting against systems.
Yeah.
And when folks say systemic racism or systemic issues, it's because even the people like Stu talked about, the folks who have the right thing in mind, who want to do the right thing for the kids. When you work within the system and you try to work as a part of the system, you get caught up in the whole function and purpose of the system. And there are policies and things in place that were meant to divest, that were meant to segregate and break apart, that were meant to cause the haves and the have-nots and set some folks up for a place of and take it all over again, right? It's not, the things that we're talking about now are not new, right? Gentrification is not new. Redlining didn't happen. It's been happening, right? And it's never gone away. It's never gone away. It's affected all of our Black and brown families in central Ohio and Columbus proper, but also, again, our working families that may or may not be Black or brown. They may be
Right.
white. They may be immigrants, right? The South Side, historically, a lot more white folks on the South Side of Columbus, right? But working class folks, labor, specifically labor, right? With Buckeye Steel and where it used to be heading into what's known as kind of like that Scioto area,
Right.
like on your way to 3700
And
South
still
High
there,
Street.
but being pushed.
It is still there and called
further.
like the Loft or something now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because
No, I mean that group of families,
Oh.
they're still there, and they're being pushed further.
they are being pushed and displaced in a number of different places. Shout out to the folks in Southfield
Right.
that have been in Southfield for generations, right? And that's the thing. We have families who are legacy homeowners, whom their homes have been in their families for 30, 40, 50 years. And folks only have to consider property taxes, but because of gentrification, because of lack of access to resources, they're being pushed out. They're being displaced. Children's Hospital and Livingston Avenue and Livingston and Livingston and Parsons is a whole other world from the world that I grew up in, right? There is a parking lot on top of where our grocery store used to be. Just think about that.
Right.
And what that's done. And schools that were once there, Mohawk Middle School that used to be there, that housed at one point CAS, and then after it housed CAS, or before it housed CAS, it housed Afrocentric, right? And before it housed those things, it was its own middle school. And there is no remnant of it anymore. You don't see that. You don't know of it. You don't hear many folks speak of Mohawk unless they had been here. On Lockburn Avenue, there is the Roosevelt Park. Roosevelt Park was once Roosevelt Middle School. And every summer you get all the folks who attended Roosevelt Middle School, they gather for a cookout in the park. My aunt, uncle, and my father, who are all in their late 60s, early 70s, attended Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Roosevelt's been closed for decades now. It wasn't a middle school when I was in middle school. And my middle school is now condos. But
Right.
I digress.
All of this development is happening at the expense of, or the disinvestment in education. Now, what we're talking about and haven't really super touched on yet is that recently, I think maybe it was last week, a plan came out from the district that outlined possible closures of 20 schools around the city, many of them being in specific areas of town. One, you mentioned the South Side. There was a few schools from the South Side. There were some schools on the West Side. There were schools all around the city, but I did notice that it seemed like there were a disproportionate amount, particularly in the South Side. And the plan is to, through several different scenarios that they outlined, possibly close the schools. One of the reasons that I saw outlined was what we've been talking about. There's not enough children inside of the schools, conditions of the schools, things like that. Now, when I'm like on social media or I'm talking to people in person, some people that I have talked to about this say that, well, if there's not enough kids to go to the school, then why would they keep it open? It seems like it makes sense to me. Can you talk about why it's more complex than that?
Yeah. Getting away from neighborhood schools is always traumatic for the neighborhood and for families. And this is not, of course, everyone's story, right? We are not a monolith. Everyone has different accesses to different resources. But we do have some schools, many of which are on that proposed initial recommendation list, where parents walk their kids to school right? Because they can, because they want to, because they need to for different reasons. You have some neighborhoods where the school is literally the hub and the heart of that neighborhood. There is
Mm-hmm.
one school on that list in particular that is near and dear to me. And there is no rec center in walking distance. There's no library in walking distance. There's no corner store really in walking distance, right? And then the places where they could purchase things and stuff like that, it's closer to Bexley. Not saying that the folks don't go into Bexley, but you may or may not feel comfortable.
Yeah, you're talking about access, right?
I'm talking about
Yeah.
access, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that school closes, the families that typically walk their kids to school may now have an issue where their kids are being bused. And if an emergency strikes up, maybe they can or can't get to their kid as quickly as they could,
Yeah.
just being able to walk across the street or down the street. Or let's say that one of the schools that the kids attend, which on a map doesn't look very far away, right? It looks like it could be in walking distance. Maybe it might actually be less than a mile. I don't know. But there is a huge intersection at James and Broad that they would have to cross to get there.
Mm.
Then to get into the neighborhood, not all of the streets have sidewalks. So that's another safety concern, right? And if you
Right.
grow up in a home like the home I did that was rich in people and rich in family, but lacked some
Resources.
economical
Yeah.
resources, right? Everybody wouldn't be able to get there. My grandmother would not have been able to make that distance if there was an emergency and my mother was at work,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so now, do I go pick up my kid when they're sick, or do they just have to sit there until they can get on the bus because I don't have access to get there? Oh, you have an assembly today? That sounds nice. Mommy and
Can't
daddy and
get
auntie and
there.
uncle would love to come, but I can't get there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You want to be in after school activities? That sounds great, but we don't have the resources.
Mm-hmm.
Or this school that was open and was here that has a student success store, or a store where families and the students can shop for basic needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
When that school closes, so does that store.
Yeah.
So does my access to the supplement that I had from the school for some of my basic needs that made a difference in my kids and community.
Mm-hmm.
All my kids have gone here. My mama went here. I went here. I know this school. I know these people. They know me, right?
Mm-hmm.
They know I'm always on time. So when I'm 10 minutes late, somebody is like, hold up, no, call
Yeah.
Miss such and such and such. The community, right?
Right. Yeah.
The community.
That's what I hear you saying, is that these schools for a lot of people are anchoring the community.
Absolutely.
And what happens, based off of your knowledge, and this doesn't just necessarily even have to be about Columbus, maybe this is about what you've seen across the educational landscape. What happens when a school like the one you're describing closes in a community? What happens to the community?
Well, number one, across the nation, the majority of school closures happen in your Black and brown neighborhoods,
Okay.
in your areas that have less access to resources, right? And so what we've been hearing from some parents is that if my school closes, I don't have the energy to do lottery. I don't know how to navigate that. There's this charter school around the corner,
Yeah.
and we'll just go there.
Yeah.
Or I'm just going to homeschool my kids, because I was hesitant about putting them in a school because of my own school experience. But I did anyway, and I love it. And now you're taking that from me. So I'm triggered, right? And now I'm experiencing trauma again. And so I'm just going to do what I should have done in the first place.
Let me ask you this too. I mentioned that my daughter's within the district, and I see a lot of the emails and things that go out about attendance and about making sure that the kids are coming to school every day and all that. How does closing a neighborhood school affect? I would imagine that has a profound effect on kids actually going to school.
Yeah. I do not know statistically what
Yeah.
that looks like. But I would imagine that for some, it could, again, if we're talking about access, and I can't access my school as easily, it may be harder. And Columbus City Schools has a huge transportation system. It is,
Right.
there are more buses in our school district than there are in Coda, right? But the majority, maybe not the majority, let me not say that. A lot of our busing goes to charters because in the state of Ohio, the public school district has to supply the transportation for those kids using ed vouchers, right? And so that has caused a huge challenge for our school district with the timeliness of buses.
Right. I've seen that.
And who qualifies for a bus, how far you have to be or how old you are, right? Our high schoolers have the option of doing CODA and things like that are kindergartners and fifth graders and stuff they're not going to do, right?
Right.
So that could be a thing where I may have walked my kid down the street a couple of blocks and had a neighbor who could take my kids and her kids. Now I'm outside waiting on a bus. Where's the bus stop? It might be around the corner, down the block. It might be on a street that is not the safest, maybe not as well lit. How long am I waiting? 30, 40 minutes. When do I give up, right? Because if those buses are late for a number of different reasons, but I have my own job to get to.
Yeah. You got to make a choice,
I have my own
right?
health issues.
Yeah.
It's cold. It's raining. I don't want my baby out here. You know what? You're just going to come in the house with me.
You're going to stay home.
And so we're going to stay home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so it could fluctuate. It could cause a lot of things. You have a lot of great schools on that list who may be considered being underutilized, right? Low enrollment. But they have done amazing things with academics. They've done amazing things with social emotional learning and meeting their kids where they are and building that community. And you can't just pick up a school and move these kids to another place and expect those same successes to go with them. Because everything was because of what was built there.
I think the story that I shared is an example of that. You can't just pick kids up and put them places and expect that they're going to be in an environment that allows for them to thrive. We talked a little bit about charters, right? Like, and I think the assumption a lot of times, and not for y'all because y'all are in this work every day, is that people know like the difference between like a charter school and which they're public, right? Or like a district, right? I know what some of the differences are, but I want y'all to explain to people like what is the difference between like Columbus City schools and charter schools outside of you needing a voucher and paying and going to the school, but like the teachers and the some of the guidelines and things that they don't necessarily have to meet that a district school does.
Yeah, you want to take some of that?
I'll start with one, accountability. Part of the public school system, we pay taxes and we get a voice, right? We get to elect a school board. We can hold those school board members accountable, vote them in, vote them out, go to meetings, put pressure on them, tell them, here's what I want for my child. Here's what we want for our kids. And it gives us a line of accountability. That doesn't exist for private schools and for charters. They may develop systems of, getting input from families, but there's no legal ways to actually hold them accountable. And so you hear some really horrific stories of, I was speaking to a parent one time and she was talking about the charter school that she had been sending her son to closed. And it closed overnight. because the owner and operator basically was like, we ran out of money. I'm sorry, y'all. It's all over. The lights are out. And her son was devastated. He was devastated, because imagine if that happens to, like, again, I am a parent now, so I think about like my own child. I know you are as well, but just think about the children in your life. And and again, with public schools, at the very least, they have to tell us we're planning to do this, and then we get a chance to actually hold them accountable.
Right.
So that's one piece, is that there just is no accountability.
That's
when
huge.
education is not public.
Yeah.
But I know Izetta has some other.
I feel like I can
differences.
speak a lot about the services and things like that that are offered. And again, I always think about our students with exceptionalities and special needs. Being an intervention specialist myself, a lot of times folks will choose charter schools for whatever reason they choose it for, and students on IEPs, or they'll find out that their kiddo needs an IEP while they're there, and realize that not all of the services that their child needs and has a right to under free and appropriate public education, right, and the laws of IDEIA are not available there.
At a charter.
And not available at a charter school.
Yeah.
There may be an intervention specialist for the whole school, not for several grades or for several classrooms. So in Columbus City schools and many public schools like our school district, you have special ed teachers, right? You have some that are tutors and work with students one-on-one, or support staff and students, right, if that's what that kiddo needs. You have resource room teachers, and so they may have multiple grades, and kiddos come in for the support that they need for that subject area. Maybe it's reading and math, but everything else there in the typical setting, right? You have some self-contained classrooms, which are, you have some significant needs, and everyone here in this classroom has the same kind of needs, right? You need that direct instruction, a smaller environment. That's the type of classroom that I taught. And so you can get that. There might be an assistant. You have it for students who are medically fragile, students who have high incidence exceptionalities like ADHD or things like that. You have your low incidence like cerebral palsy, or autism kind of goes across the board with, things like that. Those options are not available in most charter schools. You do have some charter schools who specialize in children with autism or this and that, right? But even like related services, what if your kid only needs speech therapy or occupational therapy or physical therapy? 9 times out of 10, that charter school doesn't have related services.
Yeah.
And so I've had families that I know that were told, well, just go and apply for this at Franklin County Board of DD, and you can get some money and they can pay for it. And it may not be that they're contracting with the county or ESC to bring these folks in. It is, you do this on your time, on their dollar or your dollar, and you figure all this out.
Yeah, so you have to navigate that, again, the system.
Yeah, so they're navigating a number of systems, right?
Yeah.
The school itself, but then now my kid needs speech therapy, but I have to take them somewhere to get it. Maybe they miss school, maybe I miss work, but in a public school system like Columbus City Schools, all of that is provided.
Yeah.
All of that is provided for free.
And it's so I'm to understand that because of the influx of charters in Columbus, they don't like get their own money. They get money from the public schools, right? It goes away from a public school. So when a child leaves and goes to a charter, then that money then leaves the district and goes to the charter, which also leads to disinvestment in the schools. And
not only that, those additional resources too, right? The busing and those things that the charter is not responsible for. They don't have to provide transportation. They likely do not provide transportation, but the school district does, which causes these delays and these challenges. I don't know a single person who has a child in Columbus and has used busing that hasn't had some type of busing issue, but likely it is because of the resources going outside of your kiddos, right? And the district then being fined when they don't get those kids at the charter schools to school on time.
Right. So let me ask you this. Just say somebody said, well, I just need to worry about my kid and my kid's fine at the charter. I always think about the future, right? Like everything's all good right now. But how do things like this affect everybody long term?
I mean, even
because they do.
They do. Even just within our school district, right? Not even talking about charters, but let's talk about Columbus City Schools and how things that have happened in the past still have an impact on today. School closings is definitely one of those. And you talked a bit about how sometimes success, right, when we see it, the outward, you still see the outward successes and things like that. But if you've had a traumatic experience, that emotional scarring can stay there, right? It happens for our families, for our students. It happens for our teachers as well when buildings close. So I taught at Deschler Elementary on the South Side. I also went to Deschler Elementary when I was a kid. And I have one particular family who 2 of her kiddos were in my pre-K class. And Deschler closed. And they were shifted to Moeller. But at the same time, she had kids who were supposed to be, I believe it was South Moore then, middle school. But South was going through a consolidation where that middle school was being closed and South High School was being made into a 7 to 12. So in one family, 4 kids were going through closures and consolidations. And in that same neighborhood, some kids left Deschler and went to Heil. Heil Elementary then closed a few years later. And then were shifted to Moeller and shifted to these places. And so you have some families that just in their immediate family have gone through 4, I think this parent told me 4 school closings and consolidations with one family. Now those preschoolers, just to give an indication of my age, graduated from high school last year. They never forgot that their school closed. They constantly talked about it. And the mom talked about how some of their friends were really impacted, and some, after going through an elementary school closing, a middle school closing, and being shifted over here, by the time they got to high school, some of them were just done. The kids were like, I'm done. And
I'm done going to school. Like I'm done.
And then the pandemic, by the time they got to high school and everything, and they were done.
It's the erosion of trust. And I think about that a lot too. Like how long, like we're having all of these conversations about school closures and passing the levy and all of that, but there's a level of trust that I think has been eroded over generations. And I just wonder how long that will really take to change and to become better. One thing I'm curious about is, so we're saying, we're talking about school closures, we're talking about the possible scenarios and things like that, but we talked about community schools and why they matter. So if someone were to say, you're saying that you don't want this, what's the solution? What's the solution?
I don't think it's that complicated. I think it's...
Is it ever?
I think it's the kind of schools that everyone wants. Schools where there's like a high level of engaging teaching and learning, right? Where there's a deep sense of community and trust that cuts across staff, parents, community members, students, where schools have adapted to meet the needs of the communities that they're in. So maybe that's a school-based health center. Maybe that's additional mental health supports. Maybe that's, project-based learning so that kids actually are excited about, whatever the fourth or fifth grade standards that they are going to be tested on.
I don't know. She's not there yet. I don't know just yet.
Right. And so, this is another part of the work that we do at the Columbus Education Justice Coalition, is that we are big believers in public community schools. This is a model that is not new. Like I said, it's really just when people think of the schools that they dream of, that they want, this is what they say. But it's an evidence-based school transformation model that has seen lots of success in other cities across the country, even in Ohio. Cincinnati adopted this during a facility
maintenance plan.
Maintenance plan process about 15 years ago. And as a whole district, their enrollment has grown.
Okay, so we have evidence.
They have
of
public
this
Montessori
work.
schools in Cincinnati. They again really embraced this approach. And cities like Chicago at the moment, again, are saying, we want to reinvest in our communities of color, working class communities, everyone that basically got left out for since the beginning. And part of that is, how are schools going to be relevant? So they have a initiative there called Sustainable Community Schools. I worked with these folks and got to know them a bit. They were sharing a story about a high school where their history class was centered around the Black Panther Party, because Chicago was, in that neighborhood was a hotbed for the Black Panther Party. And so they went out and they spoke to elders in the community who not only, again, are giving them this like first person history lesson where they're like, oh, really? That happened on that street corner? That used to be their office. But also giving them a sense of pride, right? About like, this is where we're from. Like, this is our community.
This is our legacy.
And that's social studies class, right?
Yeah.
And so I just think so much is possible. And that's really our biggest challenge to the district in this moment, is you're asking the wrong question. The question that they asked the facilities task force is, how many schools should we close? Which ones, and by when? Right? We need to have a broader conversation about what are the schools that we all deserve, and how do we build them? How do we get there? Right? And we really feel like, something that's not being talked about by this task force is the fact that Columbus is one of the fastest growing cities in the country. And if you look at city council's new zoning plan, and I'm sure you all have somebody on to talk about that, they're saying that in the next 6 years, they're going to build 88,000 housing units in the city of Columbus. So where are the families that live in those housing units going to send their kids to school?
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, I think that they're going to be, we talked about this when we debriefed about this conversation. I think that they're going to be faced with the same kind of, like I'm in the community. I have this show, right? Like, and it's not just about my forward facing profile, right? It's not who I am out here. It's about, I really believe in public schools. And this struggle that I have to think about when she goes to like 6th grade, 7th grade. I think about it all the time. She's nowhere near being in 6th grade. But I think about it all the time about what kind of choices will I have to make if I don't feel like, she didn't ask for me to be like fake Ida B. Wells. She just asked for me to be her mama.
Yeah.
She didn't ask to be like a community person.
Right.
She didn't ask to be an organizer. She didn't ask for any of those things.
Dreams that you may not even know about
Exactly.
yet, right? Like I said, I was in kindergarten dreaming about going to East High School and being a Tiger.
Right.
She may have an idea of what middle and high school looks like for her. And we have a duty to make sure that that dream comes to fruition for her and every other child like her. And everyone's dreams are ultimately like that same, like we want to feel loved in our school.
She loves the arts.
We want,
but that school is on the closure list.
Yeah.
Right.
And part of what we're talking about when it comes to community schools is the process with that as well. And part of that process that is so near and dear to me is that it is shared decision making.
Yeah.
Shared decision making with parents and families, with your neighbors and community partners, with your students, with your staff, your educators and your support staff, and that principal and the district. And everybody is shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow on the same playing field.
Do you think that's
the same?
Do you think that they think that the outreach plan that they have put together and are putting into place, do you think that they think that's shared decision making? Like, do you think that the folks in administration on the board feel like they're engaging in like community voice and shared decision making, and that it sounds like folks in the community feel differently about that?
I think that they feel like it's engagement.
Yeah. Okay.
I think we are talking about, and what we have heard from community members is about authentic engagement and dialogue, not being talked at, not being asked your opinion of my 2 decisions that I'm about to make for you, which is historically what's been done in our district, which is what many families are saying that this looks and feels and sounds like. The Columbus Education Justice Coalition in 2023, we held a community listening campaign called Our City, Our Schools. And so we had conversations across the city with lots of folks, students, with parents and families, with neighbors, with community partners, over 1,000 conversations, right? And 3 things came to surface for what folks want. They want authentic relationships. They want this, the dialogue where you hear what I have to say, you hear what I'm going through, you respect it, you see me as someone that can come up with solutions.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm putting my baby in a grocery cart to get them to school, that should be, then what do you need?
We should be respected as subject matter experts on our own kids.
And I'm innovative too, right?
Yeah.
And I'm getting it done because my baby is getting there. What do you need to have something different to be able to get them there easily?
Yeah.
Our folks should be able to answer those questions, right? We should be able to have these conversations, and you trust that I know my needs and what I need and have some possible solutions, right?
Yeah.
The other part of that is the reinvestment.
Okay.
Which is why we got behind the levy when it was introduced, because we saw a lot of the things that we wanted and folks said that they needed in that. School closures was not on the fact list. Facilities, yes, but not facilities as in shutting them down.
Yeah.
That is not there, right? And then reconstruction. And this is what we're talking about with the community schools piece. Reconstruction in a way that there is no hierarchy. There is no, I'm the whiz, right?
Yeah,
the school board, the superintendent is not the whiz and telling all the people, what to wear, what color to put on. You ought to be seen in green, right? Those things.
I love you for using that reference. Thank you.
But the folks get to say, no, I want green and gold. I want a little bit of red and black and silver and this. Oh, what if everybody just wore what they were most comfortable in?
Yeah.
What if we got to just show up for each other the way that we are? That's what we're talking about. Shared decision making,
collaboration, and all of those things.
Grandma's got a say in the curriculum.
Yeah.
Auntie got a say in what these things look like. Auntie, grandma, and baby girl sitting here together talking about what is it that we can do differently for our school.
Yeah.
Maybe it is a community center attached to it. Maybe it is a clinic. Maybe it is ELL services, and not just for our kiddos in the school, but for the community.
Parents,
because we have a blended community. We got folks here, and I want to be able to talk to my neighbors.
Absolutely. Yes. That is huge. And that would be very meaningful and impactful. And one of the things that I saw on y'all's website that I think about and say a lot is nothing for us without us.
Nothing about us without
Nothing
us.
about us without us. Okay. I use the other form of that phrase in my work, but I'm glad that you answered that question. Because when I do interviews, I always think about what's the person on the other side going to say. And I think what we would have heard is, well, there's been a lot of opportunities for people to go to meetings. There's been a lot of opportunities. We have all of these things online. You can go read them if you would take the time and do that.
That's right.
And I think that's an interesting statement, given that we know the barriers to time that all of us have, right? And we all sacrifice for our kids. That's just what you do as a parent and a community member for the kids who are in your village. But to me, there's again something about lack of access that is being missed there, given the demographics in the district. We mentioned immigrant families. We mentioned Black and brown families. We mentioned working class, working poor families who don't have that currency of time that is assumed when you say, well, we made all of these avenues.
I put it on the website. You just have to go find it. I gave you a QR code. You just got to scan it when you're watching YouTube. We set these up. You just have to come.
And them grannies that's raising grandkids, they don't know how to use a QR code.
I mean, we got what percentage of students in CCS families have English as a second, if a language they speak at all?
16% or more.
And this is, it's not translated in Spanish, Somali, like it's not in, Nepal, it's not in like the languages other than English that many CCS families
It's not in
speak
any other language than English yet.
But,
right?
So that needs to change.
And I think to me, the fundamental thing that needs to change is we need a school district that doesn't treat community as a liability, but treats it as an asset. The community school approach, like it's really trying to say, we have everything we need to solve the problems that are in front of us.
Yeah.
We just have to tap into it. We just have to open up our doors. We just have to bring people together and trust that together we can actually transform what's in front of us, and I think that's the approach that we always try to take. And we really want to see, the Columbus City Schools administration. And again, I'm sure they believe that or maybe think it, but it's the way that you engage with people. It just continues to erode that trust.
Right.
And so, you can imagine a process where, there are changes in, the feeder patterns, and there are schools that are closed and consolidated, right? Where you don't lose thousands of families from the district forever, where it actually honors people's voices and gives them some kind of agency and ability to shape the outcome, right? Where, okay, you have an honest conversation where, the task force is, giving us these recommendations, and here's this data, and we're going to have to stop having an academic program in this building in your neighborhood. But what do you need in this neighborhood? Because this is still a publicly owned building, right? We are public officials. We are accountable to you. We are here to serve the common good. Oh, do you have a really high elderly population and not enough senior living facilities? Is there a need for pre-K or right? Like, I just think that there are different ways that this process can go. The path that we're on right now with making this decision within a month, with some community meetings that are more being talked at than talked with, is the wrong path.
And not only is it happening within a month, which is just a couple of weeks, right? Like 3-4 weeks. It's happening during the busiest month of the school year, aside from September, maybe, right? But you have proms. You have all of the award ceremonies that you could think of and all of the field trips that you could possibly imagine because school is coming to a close.
Yeah.
And so our parents are doing all of the
And we're
things.
exhausted.
I know you are.
Child, I'm tired.
Y'all exhausted. Teachers tired. Your neighbors probably tired because when these kids go
Right.
stop coming, it's balloons everywhere, right?
Yes,
Which
yes.
is beautiful. But yeah, it's not at a time where it's most convenient for folks. It feels very rushed.
Yeah.
They seemingly have put these community forums on different sides of town, but Columbus is huge. Columbus is vast, and so it's still not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And the times: 9:30 a.m., 5:30 p.m., 11:30 virtually, 11 o'clock on the radio. That's at least a Saturday. But on Thursdays at 9:30, what are you doing on Thursdays at 9:30?
Coming home from taking my daughter to school and starting work.
What about 5:30 on a Thursday?
Trying to figure out what we're gonna eat for dinner.
Exactly.
I should know at that point, but I usually don't. Like, I'm busy. I'm busy doing other things that need to happen to keep the people in my house alive.
Get to a community forum.
Well, and traffic as well at 5:30 in Columbus now is not good. I do have one other question that I want to ask y'all about the money. So, our community schools, that sounds great. We just recently passed a levy, but we know that there are like already pressing needs within the district that money is, some of it at least I know is earmarked towards. So if somebody were to say to you, this sounds great, but how do we fund schools? Where's the money gonna come from to make something like this happen? What's your answer to that?
It doesn't come from closing schools. I will say that. And there's research to prove that. Stanford University proved that 2 years ago in research that they did on closings and consolidations because they have been sold to districts by different firms saying that this is how you get equity. This is how you can spread your money because you close this small school here and you close this small school here and you pack everybody into this school, right? And that's where some money comes from. But they've proven over and over again that doesn't actually happen.
Yeah.
School boards are being fed that by the firms that make the money to have them do the research to say that, but it's not happening. There are a number of different ways to look at funding for schools. When it comes to the community schools that we're talking about, there are partnerships involved with that.
They bring in more money. Like it's one staff position, and the research that's been done is that the return on investment is 7 to 1 in terms of the resources that are brought in to the school through partnerships. So community schools honestly shouldn't even be talked about as a minus on the balance sheet. It's a plus. It's a way, and honestly, that's why it's been embraced by districts that have high levels of poverty, right? Both urban and rural.
So by partnerships, you mean like partnerships with businesses,
I'll give you a
nonprofit?
concrete example.
Okay.
Right? So, in Cincinnati, the Euler School is a community school, and they have a dentist office in their school.
Okay.
Right? And they didn't pay a dime for that dentist office because they made a business proposition to the dentists. And they were like, we know that y'all need patients. We got a whole lot of them. We got kids,
but
parents,
it's also meeting a need.
Teachers coming in here every day. We know that you're billing insurance or Medicaid. And so why don't you just set up that dentist office here? We got the space for you. We won't even charge you rent as long as you come up with the equipment. And then they did a fundraising campaign. Delta Dental, put forward those costs for the initial equipment. And now they have a working dentist office that anyone can operate. And it didn't cost the district a dime.
And you said families can go to the dentist office as well?
Absolutely.
Wow.
They actually need that for it to be viable if it's Medicaid.
And staff too. Staff. And one of the former school board members talked to us about that, how it increased staff retention.
Right.
And staff attendance in school because now I don't have to take off of work to go to the dentist, right? And so I can make that appointment. I can go during my lunch, or maybe I'm going before or right after school,
Yeah.
because it's also opened extended hours. It's not the same as like the school hours, right? So you
Yeah.
have more folks that you're talking about. Now you're talking about, talk about attendance and enrollment. That right there helped them increase attendance and enrollment. And if
Yeah.
the whole family can be treated in the same place,
Yeah, that's really pivotal, I think, for families and for time and for all the things that we've discussed. So it sounds like there are innovative solutions that exist across the country that our district has the resources and probably the networks to tap in to learn more about, to be thinking about in this process.
Sure.
Yeah.
And can we make a quick little just call to action for anybody?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that.
Yeah.
What's the call to action?
So, I think one thing that's really important and we've been trying to do is to put this facilities task force into context, right?
Okay.
This was a task force that was convened by the school board, and
by
their
the
job,
superintendent.
the board policy.
Well,
and then
that's
the
true. Yeah,
superintendent, chooses who's on it. But the point being, their job is to make recommendations. The school board makes the final decisions.
Okay.
And so what we've been telling people is, okay, if you can make it at 9:30 and you got a real flexible job, feel free to show up at one of those meetings, and hopefully you'll get a chance to share with them, how you feel and how this is going to impact you. But really, we're pushing folks, contact our school board members directly. All of their email addresses are available on the district website. School board meetings happen every other Tuesday. There will be one next Tuesday. You can, make phone calls. You can also, the board members, to their credit, and an attempt to really build a deeper relationship with the community, have started holding office hours.
Okay.
So for the first 30 minutes before every board meeting, so from 5:15 to 5:45 next Tuesday, the board members are just open door, come in, let's have a conversation.
That's
and so
good.
we're really encouraging folks, now is the time to let the school board know how you feel. Now is the time to ask them questions.
Yeah.
We've met with 5 of the board members, and again, found that they care deeply about this process.
Yeah.
They want to get it right. They want the community to be involved, but they have to hear from us.
Right.
Because, clearly there's another agenda at play that really wants this process to be fast and over quickly. And then people don't even really have time to complain. And then it's just happening to them. We feel like the number one priority is let our school board know how you feel and open up that dialogue.
And if you can make it to those office hours, it's really critical, because it is an actual opportunity for dialogue, for back and forth conversation. The difference between that and participating in the board meeting itself is that is public comment.
Right.
That is not public conversation. And so board policy, they cannot interact with you during that time, which can be really frustrating if you don't understand that. And that's why I said,
you want
Stu
them to
said,
say
to their
so,
credit, they're trying to engage and have this open dialogue. And so if you have the resources to be able to get there during that time, if it's at a school that's closer to you, if you can't get to 3700 when the school board meetings are there, go there and tell them how this could impact you, the difference that it would make for you. Maybe the difference it's already made for you, because maybe we have some parents whose schools were closed when they were kids. And now they have a kid that's about to go through the same thing. What did that feel like for you?
Yeah.
What did that do to your family, to your neighborhood?
Yeah.
Right? Another way to get engaged with the Columbus Education Justice Coalition as well is to follow us on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter at CBusEdJustice.
Okay.
We also have a link tree that is it's Linktree /CBusEdJustice. And we have a board watch committee that we formed in conjunction with one of our partners, All In for Ohio Kids. And so we have parents who are organizers and working hand in hand with community members and teachers, and they're showing up at the board meetings, and they're doing deep dives into the board minutes and into this data and preparing platforms for parents to be able to share. And so this Thursday at 8 p.m., our Board Watch and AOK will be hosting a virtual conversation on the scenarios that you talked about and what that means for parents. And they can have this open dialogue and discussion and even learn some, because some people still may not understand, like, what is these 6 different things here? What is this 1A, 1B?
Somebody can break it down.
Yeah, we have parents who are breaking it
right
down.
Yeah.
And again, I think that that's really critical, because we have folks that are just regular people who love and care about our schools and their kids, but they are also the leaders of this, and they should be, because the folks closest to the classrooms have the most experience with it and have all of that to say, and parents are that voice as well as our students and our staff members. So we really invite folks to get involved with Columbus Education Justice Coalition, with our All In for Ohio Kids partners and our other amazing partners. And the Board Watch is really that deal. Like, it is transformative, and it's giving folks the knowledge they need about school board meetings and empowering them to make a difference. That's heading into that Reconstruction era that we're looking forward to.
Yeah,
that's right.
Absolutely.
And I don't know that we've mentioned it yet, but what the action, if you're thinking, all right, I want to call the school board, but I'm not exactly sure what to say, but I've been vibing with what I've heard. The action that we're asking the board to take is to press pause, to slow down this process so that there can be authentic community voice and engagement.
Okay.
We just feel that nothing good is going to come out of making decisions like these too quickly. And I would also note, the district literally does not have a treasurer at the moment. We learned this at the board meeting while we're sitting there waiting to talk, and they're hearing from the search firm for their new treasurer, talking about the treasurer hiring process. So just, again, I'm not a financial guru by any means, but I would say, don't make the biggest financial decision of the last several decades when you don't have a treasurer.
Yeah, that feels.
But that's not the only reason to wait. Really, the community, the community voice is missing.
Yeah,
and we really feel that, like, that's a reason to press pause.
And we're really pushing for that true community-led decision-making teams, and especially at these specific buildings that could be impacted. Right? If I'm at Broadley Elementary, I should have a say. I should have a voice. People should hear about how this would affect me and some of our other schools across the district, some that will be impacted, although they are not on a closing list, right? Fort Hays is not scheduled or proposed to close, but they could possibly see a consolidation in a number of different ways. They should be able to be at the table to talk about what this looks like, how it would impact us. Is this the right move for our community? And that's really what we want. And I think that goes back to what we talked about with those authentic relationships and building that trust again with your community and
that's
your families.
Number one. Yeah. I think that's the foundational block to really everything. So I really appreciate having the opportunity to just, like, be in community with y'all and to learn. And I'm really grateful that this information is going to be, out of your mouths. I mean, I know you do this every day, but I don't take our medium for granted. Because we've talked about, right, like, access. Like, some folks are not going to go to the Dispatch to read, or they don't necessarily have trust in certain media outlets. So I don't take for granted what we're able to do here, and I'm just grateful that y'all and happy that y'all trust me to come have the conversation.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much. And as I said, follow them on social media, follow this work. And if you feel strongly about this, get involved. So thank y'all so much.
Thanks so much for having us.
It's an honor. An
Yeah,
honor.
this is the best independent podcast in Columbus.
Ooh, thank you.